number one is be yourself. And we focus on helping leaders and teams identify what they're really truly authentically about and then live that in their culture and also live it in the market and what they put out into the world. We don't focus on job interviews and helping people prepare for job interviews, but as I think about what it takes to build and manage a great brand, and I reflect on what it takes to apply for a job, I really see a lot of commonalities because in a sense, when you're interviewing for a job, you're marketing yourself. You're marketing yourself to the company. The first thing I really want to focus on, that I think you should focus on when you're applying for a job, is to follow rule number one, be yourself. And that means first you have to understand yourself. What is it that really makes you happy? What is it that you're really passionate about? What is it that you really want to do? And I'm not suggesting that there's just one passion that a person can have and only one thing they can do in their life. That's actually crazy. But what I am suggesting is really being honest with yourself about who you are, what you want to be, what you're capable of contributing to the world, and what you want to learn and the next step you want to take in order to help you get there. And that company that you're applying to and that role that you're applying for should be something that helps you take that next step in your journey. Even if you're a little unclear on the overall journey, and I think especially the younger you are, the harder it is to know what I really want to be doing for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and that's totally okay. But at least having some sense of what is it that makes me me, and what is it that I might need from a company to help me express that in the most powerful way. Start there. The second point I have to make for those of you looking for a job is that once you really know what you're about, once you really know what you stand for and what you're looking for and what's right for you and what you bring to an organization, really lean into that. And whether that's the job application, a cover letter, or especially a first interview, really be who you are. Be your authentic, true self. And there's something really important I want to say about that, because some people think authenticity means be filterless. That's not what it means. Context matters. Being yourself when you've only met someone for the first time is not the same as being yourself when you have an established relationship with them and you're comfortable with them and they're comfortable with you. Being yourself in a personal setting is not necessarily the same as being yourself in a professional setting, even when the professional setting is casual and informal. Be yourself. Don't be afraid to show some of your personality and how you think differently. Don't try to answer every question with what you think they're hoping for. In fact, don't answer any question with what you think the right answer is from their perspective. Answer it how you feel. Show yourself. Show your unique way of thinking. Show your unique passions and be yourself. I think if you do that, you're going to stand out more. And then it'll work itself out one way or another. You may get the job, you may not get the job, but if you do, you're going to find yourself in a place that really values you for you as opposed to you for your resume. The last thing I want to tell you if you're looking for a job is to remember a very important rule of marketing, because as I said before, you are marketing yourself. And that rule is don't try to be all things to all people. Remember, when you please everybody, you amaze nobody. And especially when you're applying for a job, you need to amaze somebody, because if you were hiring, wouldn't you want to hire somebody that was amazing as opposed to somebody that was just good? So you can't please everybody, don't even try. Instead, remember, you don't need 100 jobs today. You need one, okay? So really be yourself. Really lean into that and trust that you're going to find the right organization that will value that and that you value them, and it's going to be a good fit. I really want to say something important here because, to be honest, I think we have a very sick culture around what success looks like in these situations and in so many others. We are sort of raised and trained to believe that success means I get a job offer. It's like winning the popularity contest. They like me, they wanted me, I won. That's not winning. Winning is you have an amazing, fulfilling, happy, enriching career, and you do some great work that you can be proud of. And I'm not just saying career over your lifespan, obviously that, but even your time at this company, whether it's going to be a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that's going to be, winning is, that's a great experience. But if you show up in an interview and you've kind of practiced saying just the right things that you know people want to hear, but that don't really reflect who you are and what you're good at, maybe you'll get the job offer. And on that day, in that moment, you're going to think, yay, I won. But you didn't win. Actually, you lost because you got a job that's not right for you. And somewhere down the road, it's not going to work out, and they're probably going to have to let you go. Or maybe even worse, they won't. And you're going to be there, and you're going to somehow feel unfulfilled. And you're leaving your potential kind of at the door, and you're not able to show up fully as yourself. And that's a miserable experience. That's not winning. Winning is finding a place that will value you for who you are, that will let you be fully you, that will use the amazing skills you have and help you grow them in a way that feels right to you. That's what winning is. And when you stop trying to please everybody and avoid all potential controversy, and instead you just show up as you, you allow the people interviewing you to assess whether you as you are a good fit for this organization. And if they make you an offer, you have a much higher chance of knowing that this is going to work out because we're a good fit. That's what you're looking for, a good fit, not winning a popularity contest. And when you follow rule number one, and you're really yourself, and you fully lean into that in a really authentic way, and you stop trying to please the people who aren't going to be all about that, you're going to be much, much happier. I started rule number one because, and this is going to be a little cheesy, I really care about people. And I think everyone has something unique to offer. And we all suffer when people don't bring that unique thing out and share it with the people they work with and maybe ultimately the world. And so I see too many people, especially having interviewed folks over the years, trying so desperately to land that job when I can tell it's a painful experience for them, and sometimes they're actually pursuing the wrong thing for them. And so I want to help people. I don't actually do interview prep and coaching as part of my business, but I really do care about this a lot. And so if you're out there, if you're looking for a job, if you've been struggling a little bit finding something that's right for you, whether you're just coming out of college or whether you're well into your career and you're looking to reboot that career in some way, I am happy to help you. So a few lucky folks out there, if you click the link below, you'll get a chance to sign up and maybe win a coaching session with me where I'll help you prepare to apply for or interview at a company and help you really figure out how to present yourself in the right light. We've got a really special guest today that I know you're going to love hearing from. Her name is Deborah Hankin. She's a friend of mine. We've worked together. She's amazing. She's led talent at multiple creative agencies and continues to do that today, and has a lot of really good advice for job applicants to really think about how to show up in the right way. All right, I'm super excited to be here with a dear friend of mine, Deborah Hankin, who is the Chief People Officer at a very cool marketing healthcare agency called W2O. And if I got that wrong, Deborah's gonna set me straight. So, hi, Deborah.
Hi, nice to see you, Adam. How are you?
Good. It's Friday, and it's been a long, crazy week, and I badly need a weekend.
I know, we all do. And it's so nice. It's the nice part of the year where the hours on the day are the longest of sun, and so it feels really good. I'm looking forward to a great weekend.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, why don't we talk about people?
Yes. Well, let's start with you. I was wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about your career or personal journey, how you got where you are now, and what that was like.
Well, I always wanted to work in marketing and advertising because I understood that it's not what the president says, it's what the media says the president says. And so if you really want to have real influence, you need to work in marketing or advertising. And so I geared my entire career towards doing that, and got my master's in marketing, and then went into advertising and worked internationally. But then when I had my son, I realized I would never see my child because I worked kind of crazy hours. So I called every recruiter I knew in town, and I asked if I could have a 9-to-5 job in advertising. And they said to me, you're nuts. That doesn't really work. But one woman took it upon herself to find a woman who was going on a maternity leave. And she said to me, this woman's going on maternity leave and she does recruiting for the firm. Would you be interested in sitting in for her? And I said, well, yes, I would. And that launched a new episode in my career of actually doing talent acquisition for marketing and advertising people. And I haven't looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. And so what do you do for W2O? What does the chief people officer do?
So I'm responsible for the people experience of all of our employees. And what that looks like is ensuring that from the moment someone comes into our web of intrigue, as I like to say, finds out about the company, to the moment that they become an alum, that their experience as an employee is as wonderful as our client experience. And what that looks like is a white glove talent acquisition process. It looks like having an amazing experience of being able to be developed and have training and wonderful programs for people, great benefits, and finally a really wonderful experience when you leave, that you stay with the company as far as staying in touch and being a part of our alumni program.
Well, this is very, very relevant to our topic, which is unsurprising because we arranged all of this. But we're here to talk about finding a job, and we're now in that, almost graduation season. So I know like lots of people are excited about the jobs or internships they've got lined up, and then a bunch of others are really nervous about the fact that they haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're thinking about next year, and what they're going to do then. And I'm really fascinated by, of course, rule number one, this idea of be yourself and what role that plays or should play when you're looking for a job. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good point. I think, first of all, I love the idea of rule number one of being yourself, because what you want to be able to do is find a role that brings out the best in you. And so that could look like a million different things, but I think as part of that is to figure out, how do you get comfortable in your own skin when you're going for that interview? How do you do a little research to find out if the place is right for you? One of the things that you can do right off the bat is go on their website or on Instagram and just look at the employees. Do the people resonate with you? Are they wearing very formal clothing and you're more of a casual person? Is it a place where the people look like they're in cubicles and they don't get out, and you're a person that really needs to walk around and be outside? Maybe it's not a great fit for you. So that just on the surface, you can do a little review and find out what makes sense. But when you do get that opportunity to go and interview, there's a whole host of things you can do to help yourself to be your best in that moment.
All right, so let's talk about that. One of the things I always worry about or think about is the gap between an organization's the story that they're telling and the reality on the inside.
Right.
And so if I were advising my own kids about this, I would definitely want to say, look, not everything is as it appears. So how can we help people kind of get underneath the surface and make sure? And I love Instagram because I think that's probably a more authentic expression. Yeah. What other ideas would you have as I'm going through looking for a company or interviewing to like really get underneath the skin and make sure it's right?
Well, a couple things. One is that even before you go, you're going to try to triangulate and find out about the company. So it makes sense to obviously go see who you're connected to. Does anybody know anybody there? It's a great way to do just an off the record kind of some reconnaissance about what happens at the company and what do they believe in, and just what does the day-to-day life look like there. After you've done some homework, and also, there's the obvious suspects too, like Glassdoor reviews and other things like that, which I take with a grain of salt, but still another way of getting some scoop. But the other thing you're going to do is you're going to come equipped with some really smart questions to your interview. And so one of the questions that I really think helps to get underneath the skin of the company a little bit is to ask, assuming that all goes according to plan, and what would someone who was really successful in this role have done in the first 90 days? Even someone telling you about what that looks like, and does that resonate with you? Does that make sense to you? Can help you understand a little bit more about whether it sounds like something that would be a good fit for you. If they have this, incredibly complex way over the top amount of stuff that needs to happen in the first 90 days, you might think to yourself, maybe they're not realistic about what can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's setting you up for maybe failure. Or if it's not that much and you're like, wow, that doesn't sound that bad, maybe you can actually show them like, yeah, that sounds amazing. I'd love to do that. And if that goes well, what if I could do X, Y, and Z? And they're like, wow, that was even more amazing. So even just getting a benchmark on what expectations look like could be really helpful to you.
Yeah. You know, one thing I could imagine people asking, I once had a job and I worked at a company, and the people who were kind of held up as models of what the organization was all about were generally assholes. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to be like them. And I could imagine asking, well, can you tell me some stories about the people here who are really respected? Why are they respected?
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, no, I love that question. I'm going to start adding that to my own routine. I think that that's a smart question also because, for example, if you hear from people that they really are a hero culture, and what I mean by that is, something's going terribly wrong and so rushes in to save the day. They drove 12 hours to meet with that client just to make sure that everything was going well, even though they were giving birth that afternoon, whatever that story may be, that you're like, wow, okay, that's the kind of, they appreciate heroes. That can tell you a lot about what you're in for and what will be respected and prized versus somebody saying, this team came up with a really great idea, and how each meeting they had, they were able to make it better as a team. It's not to say one is better than the other, to tell you the truth. It's just what appeals to you.
Yes.
Some cultures are very collaborative, some are not. It just depends. But I think it's good to see as much as you can before you get there what you might be in for.
Yeah. One of the other topics we're going to talk about in another show has to do with companies and brands and how they bring themselves to life. And I think this is two sides of the same coin, meaning companies often paint a phony picture of themselves. And I don't mean they're trying to be dishonest. It's just when you sit down to write a website, you tend to idealize and airbrush a lot of the stuff that's the reality of the day-to-day. And people do the same, because when you sit down to write a resume, you try to make yourself look like the best version possible. And also you're kind of imagining what you think someone wants to hear.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a pitfall that a lot of people end up falling into, is they all read the same books or articles about how to find a job, and then they end up saying the same things and they don't sound distinctive from any other candidate. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that people tend to get very cliche when they're going to interview for a job or apply for a job. And it actually, I think, can really hurt you. I don't mean that you have to do something like something that is bizarre, but I think that one of the things that really resonates with a hiring manager, is the why. So when you apply or you write a cover letter, to be able to say, for example, for my company, you might say, I was really impressed with the work you did with Repatha, which is a rheumatoid arthritis injectable. I was really impressed with that work because you helped educate people how to inject that drug in a way that was less painful. And I found that being able to make the world a better place through educating people to take their drugs in a way that was more hurt less and increased their the outcome of the better outcomes for them, gives me or makes me really excited about that kind of work. So that was a long-winded way of saying that making it personal to you, why you want this, really makes a big difference. If you just, what you don't want, I used to get cover letters sometimes and people would forget who they were sending the note to be like, I'm really excited to work at Victoria's Secret because blah, blah, blah. I'm really excited to work at, Caterpillar. And you're like, wow, this is really scary. Like they don't even know where they're sending this to. It doesn't even make sense anymore. So you want to spend a little time thinking about what it is that is compelling to you about that company. People really want to hear that, because at the end of the day, passion makes up for a lot of what you don't have. So you want to show how excited you are to learn, to share your experience, to be a part of something that they're doing that really makes a difference. And that kind of enthusiasm can cover up for a lot of what you don't have.
That's really helpful. Really. So I've been arguing or claiming that it's important to be yourself when you're looking for a job. And the reason I've always felt that way is I think that you're not right for every company, and not every company is right for you. And if you try to pretend like you're right for them and they're right for you, you might succeed and then find yourself having this job that you don't really like, and that it's not really growing you. Now, this be yourself thing, and we've talked about this in the past, can also go wildly wrong. Like you could be too much yourself.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you have any funny stories to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, people want to know that they're hiring a professional, and whatever that looks like. They want to know that you're on it, that you are, you're going to do a great job. You've got a great attention to detail, that you are good with people in whatever way that shows up in your work. At the end of the day, there are some basics you have to come across as being that person. I once had a woman who I had asked about, to talk to me about one of the things that didn't go right in a project she was working on. And she started to tell me about her father dying. And she started to cry in the interview. And as much as it was very, heartbreaking to hear her story, I also didn't need her to cry in the interview. Like that was like, wow, okay, this is clearly has touched a nerve, but that's maybe being too much yourself. You want to be able to also think about the context of where you are, which is, in a professional setting, you're trying to get hired. And it made me think at that moment, as much as I was very concerned about her, that this was so difficult for her, it also made me question her judgment in the moment of what kinds of things, if she could cry at the drop of a hat, what else might happen? That, that something else on the job, she, something else, the copy machine doesn't work and she loses it. So it's not, it's not necessarily funny, but it does give you pause. So that's an example where it's like, all right, I appreciate you being so comfortable with me that you could start to sob, but maybe not the time.
Well, and this is something I think a lot of people get wrong about being yourself and about authenticity, a buzzword that we're going to come back to, because I think you have to acknowledge that this is a relationship we're having. And if this is an interview and I've just met you 30 seconds ago, I don't yet have a relationship with you where, I trust you or you trust me, and that we've earned the permission to be sharing those things with each other. And I think that's why these things go wrong, is because that woman assumed trust and assumed a level of intimacy that she hadn't earned yet.
Correct.
And it just wasn't the right environment for that.
Correct. And you never want to make the other person, especially, I mean, this goes for, I would argue, for dating as much as it goes for dating a company. You never want to make that person feel awkward. So one of the things that I find very difficult is when people ask me, is there anything else that gives you pause about my background and why you wouldn't hire me? And I really despise that question, because now I'm on the back foot. And what I'm thinking to myself is, there's basically nothing you've told me that I want makes me want to hire you. I don't even know where to start. But but in all honesty, you never want to make it awkward for the interviewer. You want to make them feel very comfortable with you, because at the end of the day, it's also, as much as you want to make sure you're expressing your what you're able to bring to the company, it is about people, and it is about making that connection. So you want to make sure that you are bridging that gap of having it be a total stranger, and being able to present yourself as somebody who is really compelling. I find one of the things that's most successful is to be able to ask good questions in the interview. And I don't mean you're supposed to grill the person, meaning I'm not interviewing you. In this example, I'm actually being interviewed. And as a candidate, it's really good to ask a question in the middle. So if someone's telling you about something about the role, so for example, if Adam, you would ask me a question about, you would say to me, what kinds of hours have you been working previously at your other role? And I might say, oh, you know what, it's interesting. I typically work about a 60-hour week. What do you find the hours are here? Even establishing that easy dialogue can help to bridge or to make you more appealing to that other person.
Yeah, it sounds to me like there's something about drawing the other person in, making
Absolutely.
them want to kind of step into your world for a bit, as opposed to like, I'm here to sell. Like, this is a hard sell. I'm trying to get this job, and I'm trying to convince you that I'm awesome.
Yes. Yeah. And I would argue most people hate the hard sell. And another little thing that I found is, like, you first go out, you go to shake someone's hand and introduce yourself. So, hi, I'm Deborah Hankin. It's really nice to meet you. Hi, nice to see you. The first thing you don't want to have happen is that you brought your nasty Starbucks cup with you. You're like, oh, do you have a trash can? It's like the first thing out of your mouth is like associating you with garbage. It's like, you go to shake my hand and you need to put it somewhere. So I always say to people, like, don't bring your coffee cup. Just throw it away before you start, when you're waiting, for the person to meet with you. Because again, establishing that rapport from the very get-go and being able to look into their eye and shake their hand starts you off on a good setting, in a good foot. And having you be looking for garbage is exactly the opposite of what you want to be doing.
That's brilliant. I've never heard that example, but it's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, it's a tiny little thing that makes no difference, but it does make a huge difference. The other thing I'll tell people that, as far as putting your best foot forward and bringing your best self to your authentic self to an interview, is I tell people to never take notes in interviews. And that seems very counterintuitive to a lot of people, but the only time you ever need to take a note in an interview is when someone's telling you something that is something that you literally could not remember, like, please call so-and-so on this number, or here's the email address to get to so you can come back for the next interview, or here's the organizational chart of who reports to whom. You may not be able to remember that off the top of your head, and so you might need to write that down. But 97% of the time, you aren't taking notes. And the reason why I recommend that is because the moment you start looking down and writing notes is the moment you've lost that person's eye contact. And this is all about you two getting into it with each other and establishing that bond. And anything that breaks that bond, whether that's the garbage from your Starbucks or you writing a note, breaks that. And so it's such a small thing, but I've had people come to me, Deborah, I've been trying for months to get a job and I'm really struggling. And I'll interview them and I'll see them taking furious notes. And I'll just say, please don't. Please don't. Please don't. And they're like, well, how am I going to know? How am I going to remember? I'm like, you don't need to. Just listen to the person. And like I said, only write it down if you absolutely, it would be something you'd have to go back to later because your short-term memory won't retain it. And sure enough, I kid you not, the next time they go for their next interview, they get the job. It's like clockwork. So it really is a proven method for me.
That's great. So you heard it here, folks. This is the top tip.
Yeah.
You used the dating analogy before, and I wondered which of us was going to go there first. But it strikes me as funny that we take notes in interviews, but we rarely take notes on dates. And if we did, it would look really bizarre because we're here to have a moment of human engagement, and now I break it. It's like breaking that that kind of fourth wall, you know,
Yeah.
like going to your notebook. And I think there's something about business that makes people, you know, or professional environments that makes people feel like the rules of human nature and human engagement don't apply here, which I think is completely the furthest thing from the truth. Like, you're still a human being, and so are they.
Right. And I think that that's such a good point. I really wish I could have taken notes on dates so I could remember, like, not to go out with that person again, but or to ask about something later that they said. But in an interview, you're absolutely right. In that moment, you know, you're absolutely right about having it be a very human moment. And one of the things that I found to be most successful is when you talk about things that from your perspective. So one of the questions I really love to ask people in an interview, and if you hear me ask you this, you can't have said that you heard it here because you'll have been prepared. But one of the things I really love to hear from people is I'll ask them, you know, if I were to go back to your last employer, which I don't, and I was to ask them what the most misunderstood thing about you is, what would they say? And the most misunderstood thing is really an interesting thing to hear from somebody about what they believe people don't understand about them. And are they self-aware enough to know what that is? And it gives me a lot of insight into how they view themselves. And again, it's a very human question because there's no right or wrong to it. But what I really want to see is how self-aware are you, and are you really putting your true self forward? And I've had a lot of good answers to that question over time. So that's an example of how, you know, you showing a little bit of vulnerability about what's maybe how you are misunderstood can really help me to, again, to understand you better and bond with you better in that moment.
That's a really brilliant question. I love it. And it's a much smarter question than a question that I hate, which is like, tell me about like one of your weaknesses or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I feel is, first of all, totally cliched, but also partly an inappropriate prying. Like, again, I'm not ready to tell you about my weaknesses. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So this is a moment when, whether it's that cliched question about weakness or this much more intelligent one that you've posed about how are you misunderstood, where I, as a candidate, am making myself vulnerable, I'm putting myself out there, and I'm worried, I can be worried that this is going to go badly. It won't be interpreted right, or it will be a disqualifier. I personally believe these are the great moments, because if they're not going to accept you now for that thing, they're not going to accept you over the next 2 years for that thing. How would you advise someone, especially a younger person who maybe hasn't gone through a lot of interviews before, on how to find the bravery to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a funny question in a way, because it's like there's good things you want to talk about that didn't go well, and there's bad things that you like. Well, when I stole, you know, the $50 from the, you know, from the, whatever, from the bookstore, they didn't really understand. Like, I was gonna bring it back, you know, like that is not probably your best example to bring about like how, you know, something that didn't go right. But I think you really need to ask yourself, does this need to be said by me in this moment? Because there are times where something that didn't go right actually creates an opportunity for something great to happen. And those are wonderful stories about how you ran out of time and how you improvised, or how you, you know, something was misunderstood and how you were able to make people understand. Those are really positive. And then there's stuff that really shows poor judgment that you probably want to not talk about, because it casts doubt on you. So, so lying, cheating, stealing, things that people might not actually hear the other part of the story about how you got better at it, maybe you want to leave behind for that moment. It's the same thing in dating. I don't bring up every bad boyfriend I've ever had before either, in that when I'm first, you know, dating someone. That's not the right time.
Yeah, and I think there's this really fascinating thing you're trying to do in both dating and searching for a job, where you're trying to distinguish yourself from a bunch of competitors. But if you do that too much,
Yeah.
it comes across very badly. Or if you do it in a way where you just like do stunts or something that's not actually authentic to you, but it's just, wow, like that's unexpected. I think that also could go badly. How do you think about managing the tension between I'm trying to be authentically me, and I'm trying to show that I'm not just a cookie cutter version of something else, but yet also respecting the moment of I'm applying for a job here?
Yeah, it's a very complex question. Um, what I would say in that case is not so much about what it is that you can do to stand out, but what is it that is unique to you.
Mm.
So you might say, well, what's the difference? Well, for example, I'll use myself because I can't think of anything better. But for example, what is unique to me is that I really love Asia, and I really all of my life wanted to work overseas in Asia, and I got to work for several years in Japan, and then in a pan-regional role. That's authentic to me, and that's unique to me. That's not just to stick out. That's actually true. I did it, and it's something that is special to me in a time that in my life and in my career. So that can show up in various ways as I talk about, for example, if I was to talk, they're like, well, tell me about when you were uncomfortable or you didn't know what you were doing or something like that. I could say, I was able to hack it in a country where I really didn't speak the language, and did really well. And here's how I handled that. I think gives people something very memorable to hold on to. One of the things I learned from you, Adam, was about having a handle. How do you have a handle on a story so that people can really remember? And that's my handle. And I think having your handle or something that's authentic and unique to you is what you want, not just something that because it sticks out to be memorable.
Yeah. And you didn't go to Japan because you read an article that said you should have overseas experience, or
Right.
hey, you should make sure to have a unique story to tell. You did it because you really felt it.
Right.
And then you told about the fact that you did it.
Right. Right. It wasn't because exactly like I was ticking a box that I should have, had that experience, etc. Yeah, that's right. But for you, I mean, there's so many things that are the same thing for you about, your areas of passion that you have. So, for example, I know that you happen to really love beer, and the process
I
of
do.
making great beers, the process of finding that unique beer, and so that is something unique to you that really is authentic and meaningful. And it might be something that during the course of your interview you might drop in there again if it relates to what you're talking about. You don't want to
Yeah,
just talk about beer to talk about beer, although I know you would, but
I probably would. And you can tell, or I think I can tell the difference between people who are into craft beer because like it's a thing, as opposed to people who are into it because they're into it.
yeah.
People who show up at certain beer bars because they heard it's an it place, as opposed to I'm really fascinated by this stuff and I love the craft of it and
Yeah.
I want to check it out.
And I think it's so good. Again, it goes back to our earlier part about revealing your passion. And how does
Mm-hmm.
that passion play into that role that you're pursuing? So in the case where you would bring up your beer passion, I would be sure to relate that, if it made sense, to whatever you were pursuing at that time, whatever job it is. And maybe it would be something like, I really love pursuing these smaller craft beers because I love their mastery of, of making flavors, and the intricacy of the recipe. And I apply that in my own work of trying to find those little gems that we should pursue as new business opportunities, because I love to be able to understand how we can bring out or how we can find new companies that can do amazing work to help our own offering, whatever the way it is that you can relate it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
very memorable now. It's like, wow, this guy compared craft beer to new business. Fascinating,
You just took this to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, you have to find the thing that's right for you. But there's there's this old thing called, having stars ready for interviews. I don't know if you've heard of this, but
I
I
haven't.
did not come up with this, but it's really helpful. So there's situation or task, ST, action, A, R, result. And you want to think about, for an hour interview, that you're going to have about 6 stars, about 1 every 10 minutes. And what those are great little stories you can throw in there, regardless of what the question is. They're ready to go. They're like the hamburger helper of answers. All you need to do is add a little meat or chicken and you've got a great answer. So if you were to come up with your situation, task, action, result, and someone asked you, give me an example of a time when you had to step up to be the leader, that you weren't prepared to be that leader, you would have a story all ready to go and you could frame the answer to answer that question. And so again, people might say, well, how is that being authentic? You're already coming with your question or your answers. And what I would argue is that that's actually not true. You don't want to have the same, like if you use up your good example at the beginning, the first 3 minutes of the interview, and you just keep referring back to it, people are going to think you've done nothing. They're going to think, wow, that's all she's got. So instead, it's very hard to come up on the fly with great answers to questions. So you want to have a couple stars ready to go that you can make sure that you have more robust answers when that really tricky question comes along.
Yeah. You've just pointed to another misconception about authenticity, that authenticity is like just off the cuff.
Right.
Like, it's, actually, I think it's the opposite. To be really authentic, you have to know yourself in a very deep way. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've certainly, in interviews and just like in kind of cocktail party conversation, have asked people like, well, what is your purpose in life? Or how do you want the world to be different because of you? And I've often had people.
You're a real light at the cocktail parties.
That's after a few
drinks. Oh my
drinks.
gosh, those are hard. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Well,
but I love
yes.
those questions. I love them. That's probably why I like you. Yeah.
And they're hard. And right. So a lot of people get stumped by that. And it's not because they don't have a purpose in life. It might be because, well, I've just ambushed them at a cocktail party.
Right.
But it could also be they haven't yet taken the time to really sit down and think about that and think about what is unique about them. What is the thing that's in their soul that makes them different than any other human? And to be authentic, you really have to do that work, the introspection, maybe even writing, sitting down and expressing it in the written word and giving voice to it. That's not something you just do off the cuff. I think it takes time and thought.
I agree with you 100% that you shouldn't conflate authenticity to not being planned for, or, like you said, getting to know yourself and really what makes you tick. I love that idea, actually, because people think that you should be, Mr. or Mrs. Spontaneous. Spontaneity is not necessarily, just because you're not spontaneous does not mean you're not authentic. And, I think the word even authentic is getting overused these days. The whole point is that if you, for example, sit down in an interview and you're wearing a starched collar shirt and khakis and a tie, and you're itching around in your chair because you're so uncomfortable, because you're the kind of person that wears a t-shirt and jeans all the time, and you're just not in your element, why are you making yourself sit in a really uncomfortable shirt with a really uncomfortable tie and pants that don't make you feel good? Like, you're just asking for it, basically. I'm not saying you should come to the interview as a schlub, but you should think about, like, when I'm sitting there, again, how am I coming across as being me, a professional me, but not in a way that makes me like, when I look at you and you're, wrenching around in your chair, that I think this guy, he's not really for here. Like, he's looking uncomfortable in his own skin.
Yes. That makes me wonder whether, if you really feel you have to do that, do you really want to work at this company?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to weigh, again, how important are all of these things. It may be that, the scheme of things, what you wear to work isn't the least of it, but people always ask me, like, how do I know what to wear to an interview? And one of the things as I said before, you really want to go on the website and or the Instagram and or their social media feeds and look at what the employees are wearing on a day-to-day basis. That's hugely important to just make sure that you're in sync with that. But it's also really important to know on a scale of 1 to 10 how, if it's an amazing job and you had to wear a suit and tie every day, do you really care? Even
Right.
if that's not your thing. Like, is it really that important? No. If you're somebody, or maybe it is to you, you're like, I can't do it. Then you need to like be honest with yourself. If it's going to make you miserable every day, then let's not do that.
Yep.
So the other thing that people talk about all the time is, you should go after your passion. Get a job that you're passionate about. That you're pursue that. And I would argue when you're first starting out, you don't know necessarily what your passion is. And sometimes the sexiest jobs in life or things that sound so sexy are the least sexy.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, I want to work in fashion. I want to work in beauty. And then a year or two later, they come back and they say, oh my gosh, it sounded so sexy. But what I found was I was doing the same thing every single day. And it was just like another picture of lipstick. And I felt so empty. Again, I'm picking on that industry, but it could be any industry, to name your thing. But the point being that instead find something that you're curious about. And there's a great podcast actually that just came out this season from Adam Grant about following your passion, and his TED podcast that he has. I highly recommend you listen to it about why you shouldn't follow your passion.
Fantastic. I could go on forever and ever. I have, and we should, but not all today. I've got one last question. It's just a follow-up on something you just said, because I think I've got a 22-year-old daughter. She's periodically reaching out to me to ask me questions about what she should wear to an interview. She's very into fashion, and I never know what to answer her. And so how should someone think about, like, they may have a style, a look, or something kind of authentic about how they dress. How do you think about that, but making it work within the context of an interview?
It's a great question, and I'm glad that you came back to it. What I always say to people is, you want me to remember you, not what you are wearing. So if you look really put together and I just see you as you, and I'm like, wow, what a great person, that's the ultimate compliment. If I'm like, oh yeah, that woman that wore that weird fuzzy coat, like now you're that woman that wore that weird fuzzy coat. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want to have happen. So it's about how do you don't need to look young, you don't need to look old, you need to look your best, whatever that is. It doesn't mean fancy, but the point is, when I tell people to go for interview, you always want to dress up a bit. That's a sign of respect more than anything, that you made the effort to come, and that shows that you picked something out, not because it was clean enough on your floor at home. You want to make sure that you look like it was intentional what you're wearing. But again, I should be so focused on you, the person, and not what you're wearing. So you can always have something that reflects your style, but it should detract from you as a person.
Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing what would make it stand out in a bad way is if it seems out of place, like
right,
coming in like a ball gown,
right,
a job interview, or coming in a grubby pair of shorts. Like, both seem out
right,
of place, and now I'm noticing that instead of noticing you.
Right. That's exactly the point. I had a woman once who wore a leotard to the interview, and like she was coming out of ballet class, and it was weird. It was, I mean, it's years later, it's 15 years later, and I'm still remembering this woman as being like, I was like, I don't know if she's on like going for training shortly or going for class, but she looks odd with this leotard on. And all I can think about is this leotard. Like, I really wanted to ask in the interview, like, what's the story with the leotard? Especially because leotards, as you know, right now are not really, in fashion. That you may have a reason you're wearing it because you're, doing a dance recital or something like that, or dance practice. But that's a perfect example where it's like, okay, that's odd. And you don't want something, you really don't want people saying odd. Odd is not good. Unique can be good. Odd is not good. So anyway, and then finally, I'll say one other thing that is really important in all this that can really put your best foot forward. At the end of the interview, you want to send within 24 hours a beautifully crafted email to thank the person. And if you've met many people on that day, you want to have a separate note that's unique to each of them. People share notes. And if you're seen as somebody who just cuts and pastes notes together, they're already questioning your work ethic and how much you paid attention in the interview. Try to find something unique in each of those moments that you met with the people that you can refer back to. So I might say, Adam, it was really great to meet you. I'm excited about this role because of X, Y, Z reasons. And anybody who loves, craft beer as much as you do, I'm really excited to learn more about that too. Like even just a reference to our discussion means you're listening, you're engaged, and it's a thoughtful piece. So a note doesn't have to be long. It just has to be true for that conversation. And obviously make sure that you have somebody else read it before you send it. I can't tell you how many typos we find in notes. And that's another example of where you can be very authentic and wonderful, but if you're not good on the details, again, you might have a strike against you. So make sure that your thank you note is compelling and well-written, succinct, and that can make sure that you stay top of mind with people in a really wonderful way.
This is awesome. As always, I wish I knew all of this 20 something years ago.
We all do.
I could have had a different life. Who knows?
Yes. But then I wouldn't have known you, and that would have been terrible. So it's all supposed to be this way.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. I will reach out separately. In fact, today I'm going to reach out separately and see if we can find some time to meet.
Great. I'm looking forward to that, Adam. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah.
Bye.